Have you ever had a time in your life where you felt like every aspect of your life, from your personal life to your career to who you are as a parent, or maybe not being a parent, but just seemed like everything at the same time was just caving in on you? And you said to yourself, if I could just disappear for a while and figure myself out, I would do that. Well, I've been through that. I've been going through that. And so I took a journey. I took a sabbatical. I needed to reconnect and figure out who the F I was. And today I'm going to talk very candidly and very openly about that journey with a very special friend right after this. Do you ever ask yourself, what is this life I'm living? How did I get here? Will I ever feel fulfilled? The answer is yes. Your story is far from over. These broken pieces of your past can become the foundation for something extraordinary. I've been there more times than I'd like to admit. On the outside, I appeared strong, confident, and put together. But inside, I was lost, exhausted, and unsure of who I was anymore. So I made a choice. I made the hard decision to put myself first. And in that discovery, there's power, clarity, and a light that cannot be extinguished. You're not broken, and you're not alone. It's time for your truth, for your healing, for your growth. So are you ready? Welcome back to a brand new season of the Lorraine Lindsey podcast. I wanted to start this season off with my own personal journey. I am very, very intentional this season to talk to you all out there about really understanding the dynamics of who we are at the essence. We trap ourselves in labels, in titles, and things that we're supposed to be, and we get lost. And I have personally been experiencing that myself and have had some major shifts in my life. And so I want to talk about that, not just about me, but I want to talk to you out there who are experiencing those things. And hopefully together this season, we can gain some clarity. So on this episode, this first episode of this season, I thought, well, first let me say that I went away for 30 days. I picked up and packed up and left, needing to make some very significant decisions in my life. I was definitely at an all-time low. And so I want to come on the show. I took a break, wanted to come on this show and to start off by being very candid about what that journey was like for me. And I thought long and hard about who could I have interview me, because I didn't want to just sit and talk and be long-winded or maybe forget to say something important. So I brought my dear friend, who I think is a remarkable man. He is motivational. He has been all inspiring for me since the moment I met him, to be here with me to talk to me about that journey. And it is going to be very vulnerable for me, if I'm being honest, but I want to be truthful. I want to be candid with the intention that what I share with you will be something that hopefully you can reflect on and gain some insight for yourself in your life. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my dear friend, Mr. Rodney Allgood. Hi, Rodney.
Hi. Today I get to do my best Dr. Phil impression.
I love it.
Switching seats. I get to host. All right. So let's just get right into it, Lorraine.
Okay.
You took a trip for a month.
A month,
by
30 days.
yourself to Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what made you pick Spain, and what made you go by yourself and do this for a month all by yourself in the first place?
Oh, okay. Well, it's crazy because I wanted to do sabbatical, like get away at different times in my life where I was kind of going through hardships and thinking like just kind of wanting to run away from it all. But at different times, like when I was a young mother, I felt like that. And of course I was like, I can't do this. I can't just pack up and leave my son with somebody for a month or what have you, or however long. But it was always something that I wanted to do, to see if I were just by myself, uninterrupted, what would I discover about myself that I have forgotten, And so at this particular time in my life, there was a lot that was going on. A lot of things had happened. And so I felt like if I didn't take this journey now, first of all, I never would. But at the same time, too, I also felt like I felt so completely lost with who I was, my identity and all of that, that it was the best time to do it. There would have never been a better time in my life than to do it than now. And let me be honest and say that I was also blessed enough that I could afford to take that time off. It was a risk, but it was a risk that was well worth it in the end.
It must be a little intimidating in a way to have to sit with yourself all that time. You know, to not have anyone to bounce off of, to not have someone to distract yourself, and to just sit with all your thoughts.
Like I'm feeling myself get emotional just thinking about it. Yeah.
Because a lot of times we want to run. A lot of times, I mean, that heavy stuff, especially when you're going through a life transition, it's difficult to just be with yourself and not have someone to bounce off of. Let me ask you, did you purposely kind of isolate yourself, not allow yourself to message people on Facebook? And
yeah, I mean, it's funny because, you know, you went to Spain for 30 days. It was like I didn't go as a tourist,
Right.
okay? So I chose, because you had asked, why did I choose Spain? I had been to Spain multiple times, so I needed to feel a little bit comfortable with where I was going. I needed to feel safe as a woman traveling alone for such an extended period of time. But I didn't pick like the mainstream places. Like I wasn't going to go to like Barcelona or Madrid or something like that where it was easy to kind of interact and conversate. I wanted to kind of go someplace where it would kind of force me to be uncomfortable.
right.
Forced me to kind of be a recluse. And so I picked a place that was just north of Barcelona, about an hour away. Costa Brava was the area, and it was Del Mar or something like that. I can't remember. And I picked an off season to go, where it wasn't going to be very heavy with tourists, and a lot more locals would be around. And I don't speak the language. And so that was another thing that made me a little nervous to go. But I knew that it would force me to dig deep. And also before I left, I created some questions. I went and said, okay, I want to be able to get up every morning and spend 30 minutes in utter silence. But the first thing I want to do is be able to dig deep and ask myself a question that I need to be honest with myself about. And then I would sit in silence for about 30 minutes every day and just let come up, whatever wanted to come up. And every day the intention was of the questions were going to be a little bit harder, and they were going to dig a little bit deeper. And so I started off by going on like ChatGPT and saying, okay, here's what I'm doing. Here are the things that I am struggling with in my life. Here's the decisions that I know that I need to make. I need help with you creating some questions for me to help me navigate that. And I told it, 30 days, blah, blah, blah. So it spit out some questions for me, and I went and read through them, and I was like, no. And so I kind of tweaked. So I went back and forth tweaking until I felt like, okay, let me hit the enter button and let it populate the questions, but I don't want to look at the questions because I didn't want to anticipate my answers. I needed it to be really raw. And so whatever it came up with, I just printed the sheet and took it with me. And so, yeah, it was a lot to unpack.
So going on this trip, would you say that you had something you were specifically looking for? Did you already know what you were looking for, or did you just expect to kind of maybe find it along the way, or just to go within and let it pop up out of you?
I knew what I was struggling with. I knew emotionally what I was going through. So I was in a relationship for 10 years. It was on and off again. And this time around, we were 3 years back together. I know that we loved each other very much, but it was a very unhealthy relationship. And it was something I wasn't being very honest about. And there were ways that I felt in that relationship that it got to the point where it was overwhelming and I felt lost in that. But at the same time, too, with us getting back together, I had also walked away from a very lucrative career that I had. And it was a sexy career, right? I had like all the bells and whistles and got to do all the fun stuff. And it was a very glamorous career that I had. But I knew I was really burnt out because it looked glamorous, but there was more to that job. And I knew that I didn't want to do that any longer. So in the beginning, when I got back with my significant other, you know, he was very encouraging and very supportive of me leaving that career. And then when I did, things kind of changed. At the same time, too, you know, I was a single mom. I was a young teenage mother for many years of my life, you know. And my son was thriving. He moved to New York and he was doing very well for himself. And he didn't need me the way he needed me. And he was such a compelling wife for me for so long. When I left my career, I left it with the intention to really go after my coaching. I felt like I was very driven by it. It was such a hard call in my life. But, you know, you jump out of the plane and the parachute opens, but then you land in the middle of nowhere. And I wasn't anticipating that. So there were these things in my life that was like, okay, the mommy role isn't there to compel me any longer. This cool, glamorous job that had this comfortable cushion of income is gone. And this relationship where I thought there was going to be the support is not, it's not there. And so, and I'm not saying it as in a way to fault anyone, but it was just like, and then there were dynamics that were happening within my home where I was like, who the fuck am I? Like, how did I get here? Why are these the choices that I've been making? And at no fault of the other person or anything like that, I don't want this to be that kind of conversation. But there was just a lot of like compassion fatigue I was going through. I was not sure. I think I had made a mistake in the direction of coaching and had the imposter syndrome. I had grinded my entire life working so hard, and I finally had like a moment to breathe. And I thought, okay, this is good for now, but then all of a sudden I lost my desire to ever want to grind again. And I'm like, I can't sustain this. And especially not in this environment that I'm living in. And so those were the things that I needed to get clarity on when I went on this trip.
Yeah, I find that there's different seasons of life, and what worked in another season sometimes doesn't work in the season you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's major shifts. Sometimes your why changes. Like you said, your son had grown up and was on his way. And looking at the rest of your life, it probably just felt very out of alignment and needing a shift. So take us back to when you first got to Spain.
Mm-hmm.
What emotions were coming up? What were you feeling? Because that's a lot of shifting that's going on in your life.
Well, guilt was probably the biggest thing I felt because my partner, he was understandably upset about me leaving for so long, especially because our relationship was definitely nearing the end. And financially, there were things going on. And I'm going to be respectful of him, of course, and not overly share, but I was guilted a lot about the decision, and I would try to explain to him that I need this. Like the best way for me to describe how I was feeling at that time in my life was I felt like there was like a massive hole in my chest, and it was like a vortex, and it felt as though I was sucking inward. I didn't go home. I came to a house, and I felt like unseen, unheard, invalidated. And again, not like this victim, but just like, how did this happen? And so I felt guilty for leaving. I felt anxious about going. I felt irresponsible because, financially I would be taking some time off from work for an extended period of time, and I was spending money knowing I was taking that risk. So there was a lot of mixed emotions. I felt very, very sad and alone.
It's a long time to be alone.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So what would you say was the hardest part about being alone for that long? A lot of people want to take time alone, but it's usually a few days, a week at most. 30 days is a long time. Mm-hmm. So what came up during those 30 days? What was the hardest thing about it?
The hardest thing was returning. There was this sense of freedom with it. There was this sense of reconnecting. There was that like little girl that came up I started remembering things I had completely forgot about, dreams and the essence of who I was, if you will. And I was spending a lot of time with her. And it was crazy because like I literally very rarely interacted with any people while I was there. And yet I never felt bored, or I actually didn't feel alone. When I first got there, I felt like this lonely feeling, like, am I going to feel alone? And then very quickly, within like the first week, I just kind of started getting into this routine. And it was like, wow, like I'm afraid that I don't want to go back. And I'm also afraid that if I do go back, I'm going to be so radically shifted that I won't know what to do from that point.
It's a beautiful thing, really, you think about it, right? Because you really got a chance to reconnect with yourself and to love yourself.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times, especially for women, right? Like you were a young mom.
Mm-hmm.
So you go from being this child's mom, you were still a teenager when you had your child, right? To being in relationships, to being defined by your job, defined by all these exterior things,
Mm-hmm.
never having the time to really look within yourself
Right.
and to spend time with yourself. It's always about other people. And that happens with a lot of women because there's so much responsibility in the workplace, or taking care of the family, or taking care of a husband, or taking care of a significant other. There's so much on the plate. You know, when does a woman really get a chance to spend time with herself and to reconnect?
It's interesting you say that too, because one of the things that I felt while I was there was feminine, and I felt like a woman again. And I had realized this, amongst many other things, was the last 16 years of my life was in two very tumultuous relationships, and they were very long relationships. And the dynamic of the two, my ex-husband and my recent partner, I felt like I was never really able to soften up and just be a woman. And I don't mean that to disrespect either of them, right? But there was always this feeling like I was at battle. I always felt, especially in my last relationship, that I was always the villain. I always felt unseen and unheard in my love, because it was just like, it was overwhelming. And I felt like he portrayed himself as the underdog a little bit. And again, I'm trying to tread lightly with what I say, because I want to be honest. I want to be very honest. But at the same time, too, I do not want to go down a path of bashing somebody. It's just how I felt. You know, I'm not saying it to be right. And I looked back on those 16 years and not even just with my most intimate relationship, but just the friendships I had in my life, some family dynamics. I was always wanting everybody to be the best version of themselves. But it was kind of like, in my mind, I wanted their potential to flourish, but it was kind of on my terms. I realized that. And I had to really check myself and say, you can't want something for somebody more than they want for themselves. And why do you feel like everyone has to have this grandiose thing the way that you want things? And I really had to ask myself, why is that I need that from them? You know? And I realized also that I had a great fear of rejection. That was the thing that was a driving force in choosing the people that I chose, behaving the way that I did at times, acting out when I acted out. I also realized, like, I had this ridiculous idea of trying to be everybody's hero, like their crusader, like I was going to fix and help them be better and do better, and I was going to pour into their potential. And I had to really ask myself, well, why am I doing that? Is it really for them, or is there some way that's going to make me feel significant and enough? And that's when it was like, it makes me emotional. Hold on. it's when I realized that I can't expect people to, I didn't think I was going to get this upset, see their worth if I can't see my own. And it made it that much more clear why I was choosing relationships I was choosing. Because if I'm honest, the relationship was abusive. And I wasn't honest about that either. And again, when I say abusive, it was many different things. And there were times that both people participated in that. Whether it was feelings of defensiveness, but there was never any validation in any of it. And so it just became this perpetual trauma bond and this negative loop. And in between all of that, there was this beautiful thing. But it was forever what the little girl had experienced. So when I was connecting with her on this trip, I realized when she started believing or disbelieving in her worth. I realized that moment, that time, the different things that occurred in her young life. And it was like just kind of like peeling it back. And that was really, really, really hard pill to swallow.
I think this is a good conversation because not a lot of people would look at you and think you were suffering from that, a lack of self-worth, right? And for the audience watching, a lot of times we can buy into our exterior life, or we might be successful, we might have done real well, but still have that child in us that feels a lack of worth. And only when you spend time alone do you connect with that.
Yeah.
Because we can keep running in life and we can keep telling ourselves the stories that we want to believe about ourselves, and it can be the furthest from the truth. And what happens is over time, we get further and further and further out of alignment. And I think that's exactly where you were.
Yeah.
Come to a breaking point. So let me ask you something. Did you have any breakdowns? Did things come up for you that broke you down? Did you have any breakdowns?
Oh my God, I was breaking down.
Right. And what did you learn from the breakdowns?
That they're necessary. As painful as they are, you can't get to the next level. You can't get to the reconnect. You can't get the connection, which for me was God, is God. I can't get that if I keep hiding from being honest about things. And also realizing that the truth is just a perception, right? Because there's my truth, there's the people who've experienced me, their truth. I realized even my coaching, even the type of clients I was coaching, the people I was talking to, I was indirectly trying to fix me through them. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And I couldn't understand why I was starting to get this compassion fatigue. And I would do the work and read the books and take the courses and get the certifications and all of these things. But yet, I was getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller inside as an individual. And as a result, to some people who experienced me, they may have felt that I was harsh and difficult. And, I remember I had falling outs in friendships where they would say, I just needed to listen. And I was always trying to fix their problem. And I think there was this hope inside of me that if I can solve this for them, I can solve it for me. But never being really truthful about that, Also, too, wanting to protect people from truths that I should have been honest about. And not in an exploitative way where I needed to tell the world about things that were happening and things that were going on behind closed doors. But I realized I protected people because, I lost a parent to suicide. And I realized how, while I was gone, I feel like I'd done the work on that. Like, for the longest time, I felt like I did the work on that. But what I realized is that experience left me with worrying about people's sadness. And so what happened is I would put myself in relationships with people, especially my most intimate relationships, where their feelings, contrary to what they believed, because they would tell you something different, and that's fair, they have their story, but contrary to what they would believe, and this is friendships as well, and some of my family dynamics, I would always tell myself, I'll deal with my pain later. Or I'll share how I'm feeling. I'll express how I'm feeling. But if they guilt trip me, if they tell me, if they minimize my feelings, if they invalidate my feelings, and I see that that's because their feelings are hurt or that they're feeling upset, I would shelf how I felt. Because I thought, well, I don't want them to feel bad. What if their sadness gets so great that they would do something as bad as end their lives? And I was crippled by this. I still am. Even like my relationship is over, right? We're months separated. There are nights when I'm anxious. Is he okay? Is everything okay? If there was recently a situation where there was a reason why we needed to have a conversation. It had to do with work or business. And he didn't respond right away. And I literally started going down this rabbit hole of, oh my God, did something happen to him? Is he okay? Blah, blah, blah. And those are the things that I realized on my trip, like, this is crippling me. Because I am dismissing a lot of abuse, verbal abuse, and manipulation and things like that. I'm dismissing a lot of things that are happening for the sake of somebody else. And I can't do that anymore. I'm dismissing things, and then I'm becoming the bad guy. Because I would retaliate, right? I would go, if someone came at me a certain kind of way, I would come right back at you. If you were abusive to me in any kind of way, I would throw back abuse back. And it was just, and then I would guilt myself. And one of the things I didn't realize until I did this trip was how much guilt ran my life. Because I would never think that it would, but it did. And people can really have control over me by guilting me. And that was a big thing that I struggled with.
Yeah, some people don't sit with guilt, but they react to guilt, so it doesn't feel like guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on this trip, would you say there was a aha moment, a moment where I got it, or things shifted, or I'm looking through a different lens or a different window. I'm seeing myself differently, seeing my life differently. I'm seeing the truth or a different story. Or a story that could be?
It's hard to say that there was just one. Man, I broke down a lot. When you have to sit with yourself idly and you can't just get up and go distract yourself to the world. Because a lot of us do that. We'll find things that are easy and things that can easily distract us. But when you got to sit with it, I think the biggest thing for me was, the truth is, I'm exactly where I am in my life with no one to blame. That was the biggest realization. I've made the choices. I've picked the people. I've made the choices. And I cognitively have always said, like, my conscious mind knows I'm super intelligent, that I'm super smart, that I'm a very compassionate, kind person, but I'm tough. I don't mess around. That's what I said here, right? But what I realized there was some of that's not true. Not at the subconscious or the unconscious level. There's something that's not aligned here. And that's why I'm making certain choices. And that was hard, but it was a huge, revelation. And I started writing all that stuff down. Like, what am I saying? What am I doing? What am I saying? What am I doing? And how do we get this to align? And how do I get the little girl inside of me to trust me again? That was the big thing too. I had realized that the disconnect or these limiting beliefs that I had were simply because the little girl inside of me didn't trust the adult version of me. She was like, you have been making some decisions that are hurting us. And I keep trying to tell you these things and you're not listening to me. Because everything that inner child, that intuition, that younger self was telling me, it showed up as fear. And so I try to push it away or fight it or find ways to overcome it when it was just really a tap and a whisper. And that was sad because I felt like I had neglected myself for a very long time.
So with all these revelations that were coming up, which of these revelations surprised you?
Correlations. How everything was correlated. Every significant relation of my life was incredibly correlated. They literally were all the same essence. I was experiencing them all the same. Emotionally, I was feeling them the exact same way. Every single person that came to my mind where I was getting certain experiences. Another thing was perception. That was a big wake-up call for me too. Because I realized that some of the things that I have been experiencing, that I've been telling myself that I've been experiencing, that I've been attaching meaning to, was because I had a belief system that would only suggest that. And so no matter what people would do in my life, certain people, I would only see one thing because I was concrete in that. And so I didn't give them permission or give myself permission to see other sides to them. And so I had to take a step back and say, that is very self-deprecating what I was doing, because I could have had people in my life that were really open to love me. But if I can't see my worth, then even when they're loving me and making me feel worthy, I just couldn't see that either. And that was also very hard because it made me realize some relationships that I've ruined or times in my life where I've sabotaged things that could have been very good for me. But when I'm thinking back the stories, the way I told the narrative, the meaning that I attached to them, it was very different than when I realized, when I zoomed out and was able to say, oh, shit, damn it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I kind of look at it like this. In life, everyone's looking out a particular window. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you get so stuck on what you see outside your window that you're not acknowledging what other people are seeing outside their window, down there.
Yep.
And sometimes you got to step back. If you step far enough back, you can kind of see through all of them, right? And realize that they're all valid. And that way we protect our relationships, we validate other people, we stay open-minded to things that are outside of the lens that we look through. And stepping back and doing what you did helps us do that. Absolutely helps us do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, there were times when it was incredibly challenging. There were a lot of sleepless nights, restless nights for sure. But honestly, being able to surrender to it, being able to let my heart break, just allow it to just break, I felt like I got a breakthrough.
Yeah, that discomfort. Because you're either going to shrink back when you feel that discomfort, right? Shrink back and run and find a way to avoid, or you break through it. That's, there's always a point where I say you make your ceiling your new floor, right? Where you level up. So talk about that.
Yeah. No, it was the clarity that I got with things that came up was powerful for me. So much, in fact, that I knew towards the end, I was like, I know what I have to do. It was clear. I said, I have to leave that relationship permanently. There cannot be a going back this time. And nothing against him. I saw his love that he's had for me. I saw the way he poured into me as much as he had the capability of doing. But I also saw that what I need was not what he's able to give me, and maybe even vice versa. And I was very honest about that, and it felt peaceful. I was clear on my coaching. I was like, okay, this experience and what I have learned about myself in this moment, I know that I can teach people this. And I know that they can have the same kind of breakthrough that I had. And I had to go through this, not just for me, but if this is the call on my life to help other people, I had to walk through that myself to really feel like when I sit with you and I tell you now, and I help you and I coach you, I have a different level of certainty. I'm not doing it so you can rescue me. I'm doing this because we're in this together, and I know these revelations that I had. And that was the most powerful thing for me.
There you go. And
but I had to shed stuff.
That's the end of your imposter syndrome, right? Because when you get to the promised land, now you say, I can teach it.
Right.
Yeah, I say this all the time. When Harriet Tubman ran away from slavery, she didn't run with 20 slaves.
She ran by herself.
She got the freedom by herself and knew the way. So now you know the way. This
Right.
breakthrough was huge for whatever you're going to be doing for the rest of your life.
I just felt like when I was done at the end, I just felt like I could breathe, But I had to let go of blame too. That was a big thing. No, I'm not. I can't sit here and be angry or mad or even feel sorry for myself for the things that have happened, because it just wouldn't be fair.
Blame robs the lesson.
Yeah.
When you're busy blaming yourself.
Or others. I was blaming others.
Or others.
Yeah.
It robs the lesson. Taking responsibility and blame are not the same thing.
I agree.
Right. So when you blame, you rob yourself of the lesson. You're so busy beating yourself up or beating other people up that you don't take the lesson. And everything serves us. So there's nothing bad. Reason, season, or lifetime, right? There's nothing bad with those relationships. It served you. If you learn from them, you grow from them.
Right.
And you don't even have to blame another person because that person has their own story.
Right.
Right? It's not the same as yours. Right? And sees things through their lenses, which is fair enough.
Right.
And sometimes things just aren't in resonance anymore and has run its course.
Or sometimes they just never were and you were just not honest.
Never were sometimes, right? Reason, season, or a lifetime, right? Reason. There's a reason this person came into my life to teach me something.
Yeah.
Even if it's a negative thing. A season. Sometimes it was just the right season to be adjoined. And those lifetime ones, those are the rarest ones. But if we learn from each one, none of them are bad.
And it's hard to deal with that when you're in the storm.
Right.
Because I know that, again, that's something I consciously know and how powerful that is. But when you're in it and you're going through the emotional muck of it all, it's very hard to see the forest from the trees at that time.
Yeah,
even though you know. Another thing is there are people who you want so much to be your lifetime. Like my ex-partner and I, the reason why there was always the on again, off again, because we both knew that it was not healthy for us, the relationship. We knew that. I had my antics, he had his antics. And again, I want to make this clear. It was not a one-way street. It was bad both sides at different times for different reasons. But we also were just two people, very broken through life. And we found one another because there was a reason and even a season for it. What I realized in the end of my trip was the hardest thing I had to recognize is he's not my lifetime person. I want him so bad to be my lifetime person, and he's not. And not because he's a bad person, but the thing that is a call in my life that I'm supposed to do, we can't do it together. We just can't. And whatever his call in his life, I can't be there in that journey with him either. And that was just one little blip. That was one little part, but that was the hardest thing that I was struggling with at that time. And then also coming up with these revelations, I knew when I went back home to return that no matter if I bled my heart out and said all these things of how I felt, I knew he wasn't going to get it. He wasn't going to be able to see it, and I had to be okay with it. And that was hard because I didn't want to break his heart.
Coming back, you're a different woman, right? And that's what I'm going to ask you now.
Yeah,
I saw a change. I messaged you a couple of times, right?
You did,
I messaged you a couple of times, and I just saw an energy shift. You were smiling more. You were lighter. There was just something about you that changed. So tell us, what was the difference between the Lorraine that went to Spain and the Lorraine that came back from Spain?
I mean, the simple answer was the Lorraine that went was lost. And I thought that I was going to go and find her. The Lorraine that came back realized how much she just needs to let her go. It was never about finding the lost version of Lorraine. It was about letting that version of her go and reconnecting with something different. And so I did. I just came back with this sense of clarity. I knew I was going to have to make some very hard decisions. I knew those hard decisions were not going to be easy. Like, one minute it would feel great and liberating and whatever, and other moments it would feel depressing and dark and sad. But I knew I would have to go through all of those emotional roller coasters. I knew I had to change some of my conversations with self, but I had to listen to conversations, because it's one thing to be away in an environment that's foreign and away from all of it. When you come back, you know, the fear I had when you asked about fear, now that I'm thinking about, the fear was, will I default? Will I go back to what's familiar? Will I fall back into the patterns that I know in my heart are not serving me? And by the way, if they're not serving me, I certainly am not serving the people that I'm involved with. You know, and that, again, it's like, be accountable, Lorraine. It's not just the other person, whether it was my mom. My mom challenged me quite a bit when I was on that trip. I only talked to two people while I was there. It was my son and my mother. Those are the only people that I stayed in contact with. And my mother, there was a couple things that happened, again, where I started to connect dots and correlations. And that was really hard, because at that time, normally I would combat that conflict differently in my regular day. But being there and feeling so vulnerable, it hit different. The little girl's feelings were hurt instead of the adult woman. And that was hard too, because I also realized the type of relationship that was going to have to be moving forward with my mom without losing how can I put it? Like, without losing this idea, like knowing that I will not have her forever. She may not have me forever. It's not guaranteed who will go first. But it was hard.
Go a little deeper on that, because a lot of people have issues with this, right? I've had to make a shift in my relationship with my dad. It's very much way more man to man now. You know, it's been like that for years, but there was a time where I had to make a shift, where our relationship really shifted, and it was a good move for me. So to go a little deeper on that.
When I was there were a couple things that happened. And I think, again, I know, especially because of how vulnerable I was at that time, I saw something different in my mom. And it saddened me, if I'm being honest. I was very sad about it. But what I recognized was, you can't keep people in too much proximity to you because you're worried about them, as far as, like, you know, you're not going to have them forever, right? Because that, again, it was crippling for me to think of losing, because I've had a lot of loss in my life. So it cripples me a little bit in two different ways. Either I shut down and want to keep people away from me, or I allow them to be in my life longer than they should be. And with my mother, I had to see her pain as a person. I had to see her little girl. And when she was triggering me, as vulnerable as it made me feel, as upset as it, I was hurt. I had to take a pause for a second and say, that isn't my mother that's behaving that way. It's her little girl and her unhealed self as well. But at the same time, she does not have permission to treat me this way. And I have to create some distance, as hard as it's going to be for me, regardless if, God forbid, something were to happen. And that was hard.
So understanding with boundaries at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. It's huge to be able to look back and understand where they're coming from, the pain that they carry. Mm-hmm. They did not do the kind of work that we do on ourselves in that generation. So it's a good understanding to have.
And it's hard. And let me just say this real quick, because I do want to say about the correlation. It's really, really hard, again, whether it's friendships, whether it's your most intimate relationship, whether it's the dynamic with siblings or parents, because we're multifaceted people. I didn't get in a relationship for 10 years because this person was awful. Or I don't talk to my mother and have great memories with my mother because she's a horrible mother, and on and on and on. And also in contrary, the way people feel towards me, because it's not just I feel this way around people. The people I have conflict with have certain feelings about me too. And I got to keep that real, because sometimes we forget that part, that they're experiencing me and they're feeling pain and hurt from me too, from however their rendition of the story goes. But what I do realize is that it's hard because there are some beautiful things that you extract from those relationships that you wish were more plentiful than they are. But you have to understand, you almost have to weigh whether or not the parts that aren't beautiful, where your boundary lies with that. And sometimes it's hard because then the fear is, if I create this boundary, will I lose what I have with this person? And the answer is absolutely you will. Because even if you restructure the relationship, it won't be what it was. Sometimes those pitfalls, those highs and lows, those dynamics you go in those relationships with them, that's what makes it exciting. It's like a drug.
You got to be okay with that. Relationships aren't stagnant, and you've got to be okay with letting them evolve. So let's get back to Spain.
Okay.
What breakthroughs pushed you past some of your limiting beliefs that you had about yourself?
I think, and I'm going to repeat this again, I think one of the biggest one was I didn't realize how strong my fear of rejection was. I did not realize how deep that went. No one likes rejection, okay? But this is a deep, crippling fear I have.
Which is tied to self-love.
Yes.
Let's talk about self-love. Spending 30 days by yourself,
mm-hmm.
You really get a chance to.
Okay, so let me say this really quick before I talk about the self-love. When I realized how deep-rooted my rejection was, the biggest trigger for me when I feel rejected by someone is when people misunderstand me.
I got the same issue.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well,
I hate being misunderstood.
It again is very crippling for me, and it triggers all types of emotions for me. It can make me very angry. It could put me in a rage, especially when I was younger. It would enrage me. It can completely make me want to disconnect from you altogether, like want nothing to do. I completely shut down. I am a person who, no matter how I deliver the message, and it's not always, I can be tough. I know I'm tough. It is always, if I love you, it is unwavering. But I will not love you in a way that will coddle you or make you feel good just because you want to feel good. I am not an agreeable person especially when I love you. If I feel like you're making mistakes or that you could be doing better or whatever, I'm going to tell you straight up, especially if you keep repeating things. I'm understanding to a point. But what has happened in my life is that I will pour into people and then they won't see that until I get harsh. Mm-hmm. And then when I get harsh, then that's when I become the villain. And then I start to feel misunderstood because I'm like, but I have been pouring into you. I have just fucking been loving you, excuse my language. And God damn it, you're not seeing how much I love you. And now that I'm going to bark and yell and tell you because you haven't been listening to me, now I'm a bad person. I'm a villain. And it breaks my heart because they're misunderstanding me. And I had to let that go. I had to let that go, like Lorraine. Not everybody's going to get you. But if you're so focused on everybody getting you, then you're not spending time on getting to know them. And that was selfish of me. And that was hard for me to get because I was making it too much about myself. I was so busy browbeating people to get them to understand me that I wasn't pausing and humbling myself sometimes to say, what do I need to understand about them? Because if I took the time to really understand who they were, I could approach this very differently. Right? I'm smart enough. I have enough emotional intelligence that I could dance with that. And then if I could know them and love them in the way that they need to be loved, then if the relationships, whatever they are not sufficient, then I can be more clear on stepping away from this instead of beating myself down for leaving.
Yeah. Well, they all have their little girl, little boy they're dealing with too. So they don't always understand why they're doing what they're doing themselves. And one day they'll take a 30-day trip to Spain and figure it out.
I wish everybody, I swear to you, I wrote out a book. I wrote out this like workbook. I am creating workshops. This has sparked something because when I talked about my compelling why was always my son, this revelation is so compelling inside of me. What I learned about myself was so completely powerful. Just in a few months, I've been back. And I have already seen radical shifting in my life, massive action that I'm taking because I see myself differently. I see all the monsters in my life differently. I love them. I have compassion. There's times when I get angry. There's times that I'm sad, but I'm so much more aware of it. And I just like, I've got to gift this to other people because everybody's struggling with this.
This was such important work for you because you have so much passion.
Yeah, when it comes to this especially.
Yeah, you have so much passion. It's very evident right now. You have so much passion. And if something in your life is holding you back from expressing that passion the right way, it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating to be running in place with that kind of passion being held back. It's like shaking a Coke can and not opening it up. It has to come out.
Yeah.
And you have to do the work so it can come out the proper way. So in that, would you say there's anything you've had to let go and grieve the loss of or letting something go?
The hardest thing to let go of, honestly, at this time in my life was my relationship. It makes me emotional.
Well, that's lots of love.
I mean, I loved him.
That's lots of love.
I still love him.
Yes, lots of love.
But it was very unhealthy. And there were things, again, that I will not share.
You don't have to demonize something to let it go.
No, I know. But I have to say it.
Yeah.
I have to say the truth. There were things that were bad enough that we were never going to be able to get past it.
Yeah.
And that's hard because it's damaging for both of us. And I know that he feels just as bad about it as I do. And when you go through 10 years of so much bullshit and so much up and down and whatever, and then you come to a place where you are more honest about what it is, it's hard because you know you have to let it go. Any other time I let it go is because I was pissed or angry or just frustrated. And this time it was like, have to let this go, and this will be the last time, and I know it in my heart, and that was hard. It was also hard to have to create those boundaries with my mom, because I just love her, and I know that she's been through a lot. And it's ironic, if you will. I don't know if ironic is the right word, but when I talk about correlation, my partner and my mother, emotionally, I experienced them the same. They're like the same people the way I experienced them. I'm not going to let my mom go like I had to let him go. But essentially in my spirit, I have. And it's hard, because I've never had more compassion for anybody in my life than I have for those two people. And so it's hard when you're feeling like someone's mistreating you and you're making excuses for it because you know what they've been through, but they don't give you the same grace. And so you don't want those people out of your life, but you know that you won't survive if you keep them. Like emotionally, was so bankrupt. And again, I'm not saying it to make myself like a victim by no means or make them bad, because I'm sure if they were sitting here, they would have their versions of how they feel. And I respect that and I honor their experience. I really genuinely do. But that was hard. Like going back to what you said about reason, season, and lifetime. But what I get to keep is this. Even if someone in your life is there just for a reason or for a season, you still get to keep them for a lifetime because of what they left you with. And so for that, I'll forever be grateful.
And love is here. You can still love people.
Yeah.
I had a difficult relationship with my mom. She passed in 2020. But
sorry to hear that.
The love was there. I understood why there had to be boundaries. But the love was there. And you can keep love, even relationships that have run its course. Keep the loving feeling there. And keep the good memories. Don't let the bad memories overrun the good memories.
Yeah.
Right? The bad memories, or the bad things might have caused the split, but the good memories can remain.
Yeah.
And over time, the good memories will overwhelm the negative things. So I think it's really important to stay in a state of love, even when you have to draw boundaries with people. We don't have to make it negative.
Yeah.
We have to realize when it's time to let go.
And it's hard when you feel like you're abandoning people. Yeah. Because at the time in which I left, this is why it was incredibly painful for me, was I knew that I was leaving at a time when maybe he wasn't at his optimal. There were certain things, and again, respectfully, there were certain things going on in his life where I know he felt as though I abandoned him. I know the same goes for my mom at times when I'm just like, I can't. And I think sometimes, and I don't want to speak for her, but maybe she'll feel the same way. But there are times where you have to just put yourself first, that you can't keep sacrificing yourself, especially if the reason why they're at their rock bottom or the reason why they're not at their optimal is because of their own choices they're making. And so you get to a point where you have to say, I got to pick me.
Well, let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. When is it a good time?
For?
Right?
What do you
leave,
mean?
To end the relationship.
Oh.
Do you leave when it's like rocking and rolling and they think it's great and you just drop the floor from under them? It's never a good time.
No, I don't mean it that way, but I just feel like...
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, sometimes
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, sometimes you're breaking up, you're ending a relationship, but every spoke on your will outside your relationship is fine, and so you can just... it hurts, it sucks, it's whatever. But when everything in your life is seemingly going bad, and then the person who maybe you leaned on, and maybe you took for granted in some ways. Now they're leaving. That's hard. It's hard.
Oh,
and it's not to suggest that I wasn't going through my own thing. Because I certainly was. I had a significant head injury the year before. As a matter of fact, I chose the time to go to Spain as it was the 1 year anniversary of that traumatic injury that I had that I have no memory of. But I woke up severely injured with no recollection of what had happened to me. And it was awful. And that fucked with me for a year to this day. If I'm being honest. And I fell into a depression. Like, how could I end up in a situation where I'm so hurt and I have no memory of what happened to me and no one can tell me what happened? And that really messed with my psyche. It was a crazy year for me. I had some significant losses and that was really hard.
So let's talk to the people out there. There'll be people who feel disconnected from themselves, who feel out of alignment, who are going through what you went through, who lost their why, all the things that you went through. What would you suggest they do to reconnect with self and to find their identity?
I say you have to take, you must, not have to, you must take time for yourself. You must sit with self. And whatever has broken your heart, let your heart break. Just let it break. Let that energy, that mass that's been weighing you down and building up inside of you. If you got to be the victim, blame game, do all the things. Go through all the emotions is what I'm saying. Own it, let it be, and let it just release. And then take a breath. You know what I'm saying? And reconnect. There is this little thing, this little person, and I say this small because I could literally see her in my head. When I was there, I could literally see my little girl. Like, I would do these meditations and I could see her in the field. And I remember one particular time just picking her up and I could hear the little Lorraine's laughter. And she's taking me. It was crazy, the things that were coming to my mind. But there's an essence there. There was a softness and a little girl who had imagination. And there were things that she dreamt about.
That's awesome.
And she's still there.
That's awesome.
And so I say to anybody out there listening, don't be afraid of reconnecting. You might have to go through the stuff and unveil the things. Find the right people to support you. Don't do it alone if it's going to leave you in a dark space. There are people who will love you and support you. Find people, find coaches, whoever you got to find to help you navigate when the stuff comes up. Because when the stuff comes up, it's hard. But I'm going to tell you, when you get through it, all the way through it, it is liberating. It was worth every hard decision I had to make. It was worth the journey and the cost that it cost me. Because now I just feel very incredibly unstoppable, even with the pain. Like, the pain comes up, I get sad, I go through feelings, but even with it, it's almost like I can dance with it a little bit different.
So when I say coming home, what does coming home mean to you now?
Ooh. Oh, that's a beautiful question. Coming home means to me now, home is here. So, yeah. So when I come home, I don't need it to be a literal building. Every morning now, since then, I take some time to sit with self, preferably outside where there's some sunlight that can hit my skin. And I just breathe and I think about all the things that I'm grateful for. And I know this sounds cliche to say this, but it's been powerful for me. I think about how much life I hopefully have left to live, how much love I still have to give, how much love I'm ready to receive, how much worth that I have. And when I think about those things, how much connection I have to God and to things greater than me. And when I think about those things, I feel very much at home. So that's what coming home for me is. I could be home no matter where I am, no matter what I'm going through, no matter what I'm dealing with. I can always find home.
And now you don't have to worry about rejection.
No,
because you always have you. And if you have you and you have love and you know you have this love and this passion, that's why you do what you do, you know you're a good person. You know that you are somebody worthy of love. You know that you are somebody.
Mm-hmm. And you don't need that validation from anyone else.
You don't need that validation from anyone else.
No.
And what you've done is so courageous because you stood up.
For me.
For you. So courageous. So I applaud you on that.
Thank you.
Amazing example for a lot of people because you're a strong woman. A lot of people will hide behind that.
I hid behind it.
Just keep moving and keep running after different ambitions and different things that can keep you busy, but to just really do the work and to soften up.
Yeah. I think that was longing for that.
Yeah.
I always had this, my life, because of the circumstances of my life, led me to be a warrior, right? I was freaking ready for battle and I was not going to lay down my sword, right? Mm-hmm. That was my mentality. And, but what I realized was that everything I approached was putting me in survivorship. So I could never just lay down my sword. And I have laid it down. It's there. And if I need to pick it up, I'll pick it up. But I don't need to carry it with me everywhere I go. And I don't want to. I want to be like, and I'll conclude with this because I know we're at the end, but I want to, this is what I'm clear about. I will not let my heart be hardened. I will not jade myself and rock myself up because it's not necessary. But what I do know is that I want to preserve this essence of who I am in a way that I can be loved and loved delicately. I want to be out there as this businesswoman and doing the grind that I love to do, but in a way that serves me softly. I know that I'm ready to step into adventure for my life. And the way that I envision it is with, wind flowing through my hair. I just am so ready to just be soft. I'm so ready to be cared for instead of caring for everybody. I don't need to have this, I can do it all on my own, I don't need you mentality. I'm tired of that. I can be independent and interdependent. I appreciate my autonomy. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate that Lorraine is very good in her skin and has that great sense of herself. But I don't mind to share my space with somebody, whether they're friendships or a romantic person, loving in my family and approaching the dynamic differently. I get to choose how I see it all, how I participate in it all, and what I'm willing to let into my life. But I will not compromise this part of my life of me just wanting to be like a delicate little flower.
Love it, love it. All right, so 2 more questions in closing.
Okay.
What can your listeners expect as far as the direction of your podcast? What can the listeners expect as far as the direction of your podcast and this change and this metamorphosis you've gone through? What change do you think your listeners will see in you?
That's a great question. I'm very, very intentional this season for the show. And it's going to be very much around the programs and the coaching stuff that I'm creating, which is very rooted in identity. What I have realized is that our identity construct, the labels, the everything is what's molding and making us, these identities and worth versus worthlessness. all of those things. And so I want people are going to see that I'm going to be more intentional about those conversations. I don't want people to come and listen just to hear me or anybody rant and rave about nonsense. And not to say that I've had that. I mean, I've had some really remarkable people on the show, but I want to be very intentional that when people listen, they feel like there's some incredible value so they can get their breakthrough too. I want anybody that I could possibly touch, whether they're coaching with me one-on-one or they're coming to a workshop or they're just listening to podcasts, to feel like, aha, that's me. Okay, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be good. And that's what I hope that people will experience with me moving forward.
Awesome. So in closing, talk to the audience. Look at the camera and talk to the audience and let them know what you want them to take away from this, because you've been very vulnerable, very open, very honest in this episode. So what do you want the audience to take away from this amazing journey that you've been on?
I want to say to you all that are watching that you're not alone. You know, there's so many times that we look at people and we see them and they seem so strong and so put together and that they have it all figured out. And I know that that's a perception that a lot of people who watch me have. But we're human and we're breakable if we allow ourselves to be breakable. But I think the most important thing is just know that you're not alone, number one. Number two, know that whatever it is temporary. And number three, that you will always have a choice. And you will never be selfish for choosing you first.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Rodney, for doing this with me.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing your heart.
It was tough.
Your experience.
It was a little tough.
Your knowledge. All beautiful things.
Yeah.